My daughter is treating my son like he's dead to her. I'm at the end of my rope and desperate for some input. This is a throwaway for the obvious sensitive reasons below. My husband and I have DD, 17, and DS, 14. They have never been overly close siblings, but weren't sworn enemies either. Just two different kids with two different personalities, but as long as everyone was respectful, that was okay with me. When DD was 10, she was the victim of abuse by a family member that saw them convicted and go to jail. She was in intensive therapy for years, and we are so proud of the strong, confident, and intelligent young woman she is today. She has always, however, been very private about it. Besides our family, her lifelong best friend / her parents knew, and that was it. My son, however, knew about the abuse too. He flippantly told some friends about it 2 months ago, and before you know it, the whole school knew. Dee was devastated, to say the least. She's been back in counseling since and has been coping as well as possible. This counseling has come at a financially really tough time for us and is obviously worth every penny, but the fact that we can't afford more counseling factors into the other part of this. Dee blew up at DS when this first happened, and he saw the fallout of her coping with this firsthand. But since that night where she found out he told people and word was going around, she hasn't spoken a word to him. She doesn't look at him when he enters a room, or react when he speaks directly to her, or about her, or anything else of the sort. For example, at dinner, she'll speak to us and he'll chime in, and she continues the conversation as though he hadn't said anything. DS has tried daily to talk to her and apologized, begged, pleaded, and cried, and it's always the same. She'll usually crack a book / look at her phone, put some AirPods in, and ignore him completely. She won't discuss it with me besides to say that he's dead to her, and she has no intention of ever seeing or speaking to him again when she moves out in 10 months, and she hasn't wavered even a bit in that sentiment since. I'm at a complete loss. DS is on total lockdown. He's lost his phone, video games, any sort of privilege or ability to do things with friends. He essentially goes to school, comes home, does his homework and goes to bed, and he knows we are devastated and beyond disappointed. I believe he's sincerely sorry and contrite. He's broken down crying and apologizing to us more times than I can count, but I'm unsure of how to proceed. We can't afford family counseling, and Dee's personal counselor won't talk to me about what she says to her about any of this, besides to say not to push her on anything. I know she has every right to be furious. But at the same time, I can't help but feel like it's also not mentally healthy for my son to be treated as though he literally doesn't exist in his home for the next year. I know it's a natural consequence, but it's gut-wrenching to see and be living with. Not to mention, as a mom, I don't want my kids to be permanently estranged. It breaks my heart. Has anyone else experienced anything even in the ballpark of this that could offer any advice? I'd to add. When the abuse took place, both kids were put in therapy, and he's always known going back to therapy or talking to us was an option. He was and is aware that speaking to others about her trauma wasn't allowed, as it wasn't what she wished. He's never expressed any confusion or apprehension about that, and has said he talked about this, in the joking manner he did, to seem edgy to his friends. They have always had different personalities. They've always both had friends, but she's more chatty and outgoing, he's more reserved. They're both very smart, but she's more book studious, he's more hands-on. They played together as small kids but were just never very close in a best friend way, but I always chalked it up to age difference, personality, and gender being factors there. Maybe I should have worked harder to make them closer, but they rarely fought and either got along or just peacefully coexisted prior to this. He knew what he did. He wasn't confiding to friends in a heartfelt way, and it wasn't a one-time slight overshare. However, he's expressed what I think is sincere contrition. The lockdown from electronics and friend outings is coming to an end, and we'll be working on building back trust by easing him back into those shortly. The rift in the house is where I'm at a loss. I don't know what putting my foot down would logistically or practically entail. I can't force her to speak to him. I can't force her to forgive him. And I worry that me pushing any of that will just cause her to withdraw from her father, and I too. She'll be 18 in January and could pick up and move out then if she really wanted, but she has at most 10 more months here, is barely ever home as it is, both because she's busy with work/school and because I know she's making herself scarce, and could easily choose to shut us out too if we aren't delicate about it. Update. I posted about our issues last year, where my son joked about my daughter's CSA to friends in an attempt to be edgy. She stopped speaking to him and said he was dead to her, despite living in the same house as him. I want to thank people for the advice, some of it harsh but necessary. Unfortunately, things have not gotten better. My son's grounding came to an end, and he got supervised access to his phone, video games, and friends back. My daughter was livid with us about it, and no amount of explanation that continual punishment for a year wasn't an option made that understandable to her. I get that from her point of view, but it began to strain her relationship with me and her dad too. She still ignored my son, and he still cried and was depressed over it. I booked 3 sessions of expensive family counseling and made her come, but she just kept her earbuds on, with music playing, the entire time. She turned 18 in January. My son dipped into his savings to get her a necklace. I gave it to her and told her it was from him after she opened it, and she threw it away. Within a few days, she had moved out and into her best friend's parents' house without telling us she was going to. I invited her home for Easter, and she didn't come because her brother, who had nowhere else to go, would be here. I'm still at a loss. Her graduation is next week and we weren't formally invited by her, we basically got an "I guess you can come" when I asked. My son obviously isn't invited, and he's still struggling mentally with all of this. Therapy and medication hasn't helped much, but our options of what we can afford are very limited. Has anyone been here? I never dreamed of having children estranged from each other and a daughter who pulled away from us over her brother's idiotic mistake.